we are in the midst of a digital business revolution, and that begins with IoT, that begins with data, that begins with machine learning, that begins with cloud.
What's coming in the next 10 years is the deepest technology and cultural shifts we've seen since the 1970s.
IoT may be one of the drivers, but I would say mobile broadband is possibly more likely to be.
The way in which IoT influences the development of 5G, well, it's top priority for just about every carrier, every vendor in the world at the moment.
Maybe as a driver, yeah, but I think it'll be a user of NFV, and it just makes sense. And you know, the concept of network slicing is dedicated virtual networks for specific applications or geographies.
So we would expect that a lot of it is about services. The question is really who provides what bit into the service.
We have a use case on IoT, so there are definitely use cases for NFV and IoT outside of 5G and within 5G.
I look at it as being a user of NFV technology, along with all the other applications that you could slice a core network into doing.
I mean, most of the IoT offerings, if it comes to IoT platforms and so on, is a cloud-based solution which basically eventually will run on an NFV platform.
Hello and welcome to this Superpanel discussion sponsored by Hewlett Packard Enterprise and Intel and brought to you by TelecomTV. I'm Martyn Warwick and I'm moderating this debate on is IoT the driver for NFV in CSP networks? We think it's a very pertinent question given the age we're living in, and we hope to prove it over the course of the next half hour, 40 minutes or so, and we hope you'll agree with us. So let's get started, and let me introduce the panel to you. We have some old friends here and some new ones who I hope will be friends by the time we finish. But on my left, an old friend, Lynn, Director of Market Development Network Platform Group at Intel. Lynn, good to see you and welcome. Good to see you. On her left, David Vasquez, Senior IoT Specialist at Verizon, a big service provider.
Thank you for having me.
In the middle there is Ray Mota, CEO and Principal Analyst at ACG Research. Ray, welcome. Next to you is Eric Beau, Head of R&D Network Division IT Solutions for the Core Network at Orange, or Orange. Let's do it properly. And last but by no means least, down at the far end there is Prodip Sen, the CTO Network Functions Virtualisation at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Welcome all, welcome to you. To make new services profitable, carriers need to offer more than just connectivity. They need to provide a platform to deliver secure and assured and automated and optimised and managed services if they're going to make the maximum advantage of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, which analysts believe is going to be worth somewhere in the region of $1.3 trillion. People want a part of that for obvious reasons. And Ray, I'm going to turn to you first. You're the analyst here. You look at this very, very closely indeed. You've just prepared a new research report. Tell us what's in it and what's your take on this, the value of this, the potential of IoT in this space?
Sure, yeah. I mean, we did an analysis where we looked at about 48 carriers around the world. We looked at the economics and we looked at some ratios. We looked at OpEx divided by revenue, and it was trending up, which is not a good sign, right? We also looked at profitability divided by revenue, and it was trending down, right? And that was over a 5-year period. So that first thing that it told me is that the wait and see is not an acceptable option because this is not a sustainable EBITDA type margin, right? But then we looked further and said, what are the new services that potentially could be in there? And the first part is IoT has the potential and excitement to be that new service opportunity. But the concern that we had and what we found out from this report was that connectivity shouldn't be the only option with that, right? Because if you look at that, you have the potential to be worse off in 3 to 5 years from now just based on that, right? So the whole premise around it is to say, what technology could I use, whether it's NFV or whatever, to be able to enable more profitable services, develop them quicker, simpler, but more importantly, then be able to have either some type of platform or umbrella to offer your customers to add these value-added services like security, automation, optimization, and those pieces. So that was really the foundation of the analysis there.
Okay. Eric, would you like to add to that? What do you make of it, and where it's Orange? How is it affecting you, and what's going on?
So Orange is also a big service provider worldwide. So at the time being, we serve maybe 10 million connected devices with our network. So that's not a big part of our network because we serve maybe more than 200 million customers worldwide. So the connected objects that don't pollute our network at the time being. In Orange 2020 strategy, we identified IoT as a key topic market, and we target 600 million euro revenues by 2018. That's quite a good figure, and we believe that will increase with the advent of the 5G that we expect to start with by 2020 with the Euro event. And for 5G, it's clear that NFV, SDN, big data, analytics will be the key enablers. So that's our position at the time being. But now, we launched some IoT services. We don't wait the 5G standards to be finished to launch some services. For example, in France, there are some markets on LoRa sensors. So we launched a network in France. So we covered, I think at the time being, covered 18 urban areas. And we want to target, I think, 120 by the end of January next year. And as an example, we signed a partnership with Vinci. I don't know if you know Vinci, it's a big company, to cover motorway service area. So they will put sensors in the area, and we will be able to collect the data to better optimize the maintenance for this service area. That's just an example of what we are doing, and we are working with various actors on IoT.
An open question to anybody who wants to answer is, do you think the network is being stressed yet by IoT, and what impact is it having on the network so far?
So I'll take it, not yet, but it's definitely going there. And to some of the points that Ray and Eric made, so the Verizon brand, we've been monetizing our infrastructure for a long time. And we had this idea of, letting partners come to us and charge them for transport, charge them to use our highways. And that was very profitable. And we have over 1,300 ecosystem partners that demonstrate that this was a good business idea. But as things have progressed and technologies are, like IoT are coming to light, we realized that it's not enough. That in order for us to be responsibly profitable, we needed to move up the stack. That it's about the application, it's about the platform. So that said, we're not moving away from monetizing the network. So one of the things we've done, we've launched recently in the US a IoT enablement platform that we're calling ThinkSpace. And the reason of its existence is to accelerate IoT development and go to market for the masses. It's offered as a service, and you can start from devices. We want to be sensor agnostic. We want to be network agnostic, but use some of the building blocks that we have, like security, like hosting on our cloud assets. And, and we're thinking of leveraging technologies like NFV as building blocks, because I made this comment to Eric that if we were to shut down one of these networks tomorrow, what would happen if we don't have NFV in place to help us intelligently manage that load? So that's my comment, and because I need to compete with Eric, we have he said they have 10 million connected devices. We have almost 18 million connected devices. And his goal of revenue of 2020, we hit, I think, Q2 this year at $455 million from IoT. So there you go. But we're friends.
Yes. So we're getting into mine's bigger than yours this early on, are we?
So
okay.
Maybe I'll take a more neutral approach. One thing that I think is interesting about these services is, although the network may not be stressed right now, as we know from experience, it's very hard to predict when a very popular need or application suddenly arises, and that's where you get into the question of how can I very quickly spin up an application on the resources that I do have deployed that are going to be multi-purpose, and that's, I think, where you ask the question about NFV. What does that bring? It gives you the agility to be able to respond when you have a surprise demand for something you didn't predict.
Okay. Well, given what we've just been talking about, and again, Lynn, if you'd like to take this to start with, will NFV and SDN concepts to enable IoT help CSP get success in that area, do you think? And if so, how?
There are a lot of ways that you can actually address the IoT market. And you don't have to do NFV, obviously. They've been doing this for years without it. But just because something's possible doesn't necessarily make it preferred. And so I think it's really what is the best way to deploy things in an unpredictable market where you don't know what the application of the moment is going to be. And even though a lot of IoT is more enterprise, which is a little bit more predictable, you still do have consumer use cases, which, as we all know, are very unpredictable.
Indeed. Okay. Prodip, you've sat there very patiently up until now. You're going center stage immediately. A lot's being said about vertical customization of IoT. What does that actually mean? And what do CSPs need the network to look like if they're going to be able to provide and manage IoT services to disparate vertical markets? And there's a lot of emphasis on those vertical markets right now.
Right. So IoT is not something new. We've been talking about it for a while now. It was a buzzword some years ago, and then it sort of died down and it's come back again. And we've been doing, as an industry, we've been doing IoT, supporting the IoT need in many ways in various vertical industries. So I think that's what's been happening. In the past, the addressing IoT was based on individual market segments and building customized platforms for that. The problem with doing that is that the IoT margins are very low. The amount of revenue you get from each of these sessions is very low. So you need a lot of that to make up for the investment you put in there. And if you customize your solution to a special market, now you have an even smaller pie to work with. And I think that is perhaps one of the reasons IoT didn't really pick up, because the incentive for investment was not there. Yes, for some specialized solutions, specialized markets, it was, we've been doing it for a while. And I think at this stage, why we think NFV is an enabler is really with these new technologies, SDN, NFV, we're able to introduce some very distinct capabilities into the networks, into the carrier networks, into the service provider networks, which allow us now to build common platforms which you can use to address these different vertical markets. So I think that's where the economics will start to work, that now I can use a common infrastructure and amortize it across all of these markets, but then build a specialization on top where you need it. And where you typically, if you go down to the bottom, the kinds of things you need are pretty much the same. You need to connect to particular devices, you need to collect the data from there, and you need to send it off to some other place. It's not a whole lot you have to do in the IoT things as far as the network goes. But what is special is the kind of how you package the information, where you, the kind of timing you need to send things at, and that's application specific. So the customization really should happen at the policy and application level, and we should be able to use the common virtualization infrastructure, the network control infrastructure to support that. So that's why I think this is a turning point, that we will now really see IoT being monetized.
I mean, that's perhaps my point of view.
Ray, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Why did you put the two ballhead guys next to each other?
I've not got much. Everybody else has got a lot. Well, no.
Anyway, I think it's an important point, and I'd love to hear the CSPs. We have this term in ACG called vertical systems integration, right? And the whole idea is that when you have an area where there's a potential of your value is based on economies of scale, right? Then that becomes a tough value proposition. But one way to accommodate for that is to create these vertical focused solutions, right? Because in those vertical focused solutions, not everybody's in that market, right? And that's where you could develop an end-to-end solution and be able to add value because you're not competing with everyone on the number of devices. I don't know if you guys agree or disagree with that, or
If I may just to sort of counter that point, I agree that that's what you can do, but what's been happening is the value has been shifting up.
Right.
So the people who do build these vertical solutions, there is some revenue there, but who's getting the revenue? Not the network providers. It's up there for the people who are building the applications, packaging them all together into it. And that's, I think, the challenge for service providers has been, network providers has been, how do I break into that market because I don't have all of those pieces above.
You've bought
I think answering that question and agreeing with Ray. So let's pick an easy one. About 1 million people die every year of food poisoning or falsified medicines, right? It's a real world problem. Globally, there's $370 million of counterfeit drugs. 70 of that is in the US, right? So now we're talking pharmaceuticals, food safety. So to your point of economies of scale, how do we build almost IoT in a box? You pick a segment, you do a lot of research on a problem that has been tried and needs to be solved. And hopefully it's us, but someone needs to solve this because, real people, bad things are happening to people, but then you build a platform. And I think, that's been our strategy on the healthcare side with intelligent track and trace. And basically what we did, if anyone's familiar with the serialization component in pharmaceutical, it's a compliance mechanism. It's just simple software that lets you give a unique serial number to medicine. Now it's IoT, so we want to call it a thing. It could be the chair, it could be the monitor. So now if I can serialize down to the lowest common denominator and bring an IoT device, let's just say a temperature, location, moisture sensor, and integrate the two and be able to go to the manufacturer and tell them, listen, that farm to fork produce, we can tell you that it will be safe from the time it got picked to your distribution center, to the supermarket, to when you bought it is fresh. That drug that was manufactured is in fact legitimate. And when it gets to the pharmacy, the end user is buying the right product. It's a win-win. So in short, for us as a Verizon brand, we're using many of our assets, the network, security, managed services, etc. And through economies of scale, we think we're solving a real world problem and we'll be profitable.
And trying to do the business case on lives is the value prop, right?
I won't joke about it because we're on camera. But here are the facts. It's a problem that exists at the enterprise level and at the consumer level. And there's been many tries to solve this problem before. We just think that with IoT being the enabler and technologies like NFV to keep it flexible and be there in the case that something unpredictable happens, I think it's the time to do it, and it will be solved. Again, hopefully it's the Verizon brand, but this is something that everyone here will benefit of if we solve, food and medicine deaths and reduce it by 10%. It's a huge win.
Maybe something to do because we are solving the world. We are providing some services in Africa. Maybe Orange, you don't know that, but Orange operate various operations in Africa, and we also try to bring connectivities to everyone. And we had some experience on IoT for people who want to follow their cause and so on. So we had some amazing experiences on it. Just to go back on what we are providing today, so we are not providing only connectivity, also try to provide some tools to help company to collect all their data. And also we try to provide some kind of machine learning solutions to help them to find those let's say some problems that they can face when they collect the data. So we have this kind of tools in our assets also, but we are open also to work with other partners because we can't cover all the requirements of everyone. And for the customization, 5G will arrive with softwareization. All the core network will be software based. So software based means automation. Automation means also personalization. So we believe that with 5G and all the slicing concept, we should be able to instantiate some kind of slice network for specific IoT market, because a sensor that emits maybe one data per day has not the same constraint as some robots that emit a lot of data with some critical bandwidth and latency. So we know that some very different approach between this IoT. And just to come back, we designed the networks for humans for till the 4G. Now I think we should design the network for IoT first, and after the network will be ready to also host devices used by humans.
So I think both points of view you've heard really bear out what I was trying to say, is that using these new technologies allows us to provide differentiation based on the common infrastructure, and that's where you start to get the advantage. So
I'd like to extend it just a wee bit before we move on to another one, which is there's lots of talk about building ecosystems at the moment. What about things like coming up with a notion of, if you're talking about cooperation and transatlantic cooperation, whatever it might be, global cooperation, what about common APIs that all service providers can use together? Is that ever likely to happen? I don't know who wants to respond to it, but given the history of...
I think it's absolutely... Look at 3GPP and ITU. They can come together, and they do and have, to specify hardened, tested interfaces. So I think it's a matter of common shared interests and a realization that a consistent ecosystem that has a stable test platform that they can nest on top of grows the market for everybody. Right. So I think it's all, we already have evidence that it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that it's really an important question, because what you don't want to do is be able, from a carrier, is buy a proprietary platform, right? Then you limit your flexibility, because sometimes you're going into areas where you don't know what's going to happen, right? So you need to be able to have that open environment to be able to have the value-added services, be able to constantly differentiate yourself. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck in a bad situation there. So it's an important point.
And also, we should design the API to be used by developers, by the most developer we can find on the market, because we need to have this ecosystem. The more developer we have using API we can define all together, better will be the ecosystem.
Okay.
I mean, don't you think there needs to be some standards too with that as well, though, because of some of the... Right?
We were talking about this. There's no.
I was just going to ask you that.
There's not a backstage. But,
preempted my question.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Standards.
There we go. Whether it's APIs or standardizations, right? Everyone who's working on delivering on the promise of IoT, every one of us has a customer experience at the end of the equation. So whether it's APIs or standardization, it's about just partnering earlier. 5G comment and Intel. So Verizon's working on a 5G radio standards, and those have been published. Intel has been a hardware partner for a long time, and we have all their OEMs. So how can we make it easier for an OEM whose core competency is not module design? We partner. How do we do it where, and this has happened with, with a competitor on paper where we have a mutual customer and they can deliver that last mile. Can we collaborate to ultimately deliver the experience? So between standards and APIs and 5G and a chip, module design, I think we will definitely get there.
Yeah, I think that that's actually a really great point, because there's a meme or a statement in the market right now where you've got the service providers and they're competing with other vendors who are also large infrastructure providers. And the reality is it's very complementary. If you can interact on a standards basis, then it's who has the last mile and then who can build on top of that, and everybody moves faster and the business grows. And you've got the different specialization, whether dealing with data sovereignty would be one specialization, and others may be massive data processing. And so you have a very good opportunity to have a complementary business model in an environment where most people think it's competitive. It's an opportunity to make it collaborative.
Okay. How about this one then? There's an elephant in the room. In fact, in here you get about 10,000 elephants, I would have thought. How do you counter the claims from the big enterprise cloud players? We know who they are, but we'll name and shame a couple of them: GE, Microsoft, SAP, and so on, that they can bypass the CSP entirely and will very soon, if not already, have the ability to deliver everything themselves as an MVNO delivered platform model. That must be a threat to the established order. What do you make of it? Can we talk, Prodip, let's start with you.
Well, it's not a question special to IoT. I mean, this is a question for any service a service provider can provide. And the key thing here is for the service provider to bring the value their network has to the customer. And what is that value? It's not something new. We know that for a long time, that the presence, the reach to the number of customers any service provider has, whether it's mobile or landline. And the second thing is the wealth of information which is living in the network about these customers, about these interactions. And I think if we can find ways to mine this information, connect it with the connectivity, and package it into these, whether it's an IoT service or any other service, this is the way we can clearly differentiate value with respect to the other, relative to the other over-the-top providers, because they don't have that reach. They rely on the network provider to get you that reach. They don't have that detailed information. Yes, we all know that the Googles of the world and others have a lot of information about us. But do they know when you connect it from that location? That's really what the network has. And can provide histories of those. So I think monetizing all of that, whether it's for better customer experience or better information back to the customer which they can use, I think both of those ways are possible, but that's truly the value I think the network brings.
Lynn, you want to say something?
Yes, so I live in one of the cities that was in theory going to be broadly connected by fiber. And now it turns out that it's much harder than was expected. And I think that there's a message in that it's an opportunity to partner in the various levels of expertise. And especially when you have APIs and easy accessibility to be a partner, which is very important when dealing with some of the cloud companies or some of the enterprise companies. Let them build on top, and then everybody shares value. Because it is actually very difficult to deliver a network and do your own fiber, as some companies have learned that will remain unnamed.
You don't need to.
We still also have some advantages. For example, the trust. Some French company will trust French companies to trust the data storage, for example. That's one point. Another point also is maybe the SLA management. How we are able to manage a relationship with some kind of engagement, security, quality of service, and so on. I think we are quite good to provide that to customers, while the OTT are not so good for that. So I think we have some advantages, but we have to be good at the end of the day also, because if we are not good, cost efficient, the margin won't be there, and we will lose money. So.
Yeah,
I'm getting somebody yelling in my ear, and he's called Martyn as well as me. And he's saying you need to get on with it and running out of time because we're going to take questions from the floor in a minute. So I'm sorry to cut everybody off in mid-flow if they're going to say more, but time presses. But I'd just like to finish with this before we go to the floor, which is, I take it then we can all agree that everybody needs, everybody involved needs an IoT strategy, that they need to leverage their existing infrastructure assets as much as they possibly can, and that they need to optimize the employees they have and re-enthuse and retrain them to be able to do this. Just a quick one-word answer each or thereabouts. Is that the way things are going, and do you see this becoming a feasible, workable reality in a sort of almost semi-cooperative way within the next 12 months, 18 months? Lynn, what do you think? Where are we?
I think it's a journey. Obviously, I mean, we've been doing it before, as Prodip said, and now we're surging back again. But I do think that there is some symbiotic relationship between having a common platform and being able to do rapid customization in a more software-based environment that gives better economics and better responsiveness, easier prototyping. So 12 to 18 months, I wouldn't want to say that we're going to be at the 50 billion devices that have been predicted. But I would say that it becomes much easier to capitalize and much easier to make money and much easier to manage and deal with an unpredictable environment.
Okay. David.
Agree. And in 30 seconds, platforms will democratize IoT. And at the end of the day, when we're looking at this in HD video, it's like the VHS of today. The shop that will win is who has the most meaningful data that delivers the right business insight to the right person at the right time. Customers, that's what they're thinking about. They're not thinking about the infrastructure, coverage, NFV, SDN, modules, 5G. No. Will IoT deliver the most meaningful data insight? And the company that gets to give more yeses will win.
Thank you. Ray.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a journey, right? It's a journey, and there isn't one direct answer to it, but the fact that we're having this conversation, and I'm impressed that the carriers are actually talking more than connectivity from that point of view, because that was the concern that I had initially at looking at this report, that these value-added services are going to be required, and having a platform that allows you to do innovation is where you're going forward. So I think I'm actually impressed we're going in the right direction there.
Thank you. Eric.
So we started the NFV journey with deploying some NFV services for enterprise market, for example. And we believe we should become a software company. And as an example, we want to train, I think, 20,000 people within the company to be able to code. I think it's a good sign to say we want to transform ourselves to be able to answer to the market and especially the IoT.
Thank you. Prodip.
So that's a good goal. I mean, it's the first time I've heard an explicit goal, but I won't predict what happens in 18 months. But the short answer is, I think everybody now gets it. All service providers understand that this is what they have to do, make transformations in various areas. Some are ahead, some are planning well, like Orange, but they're all on that same journey. They're all on that same path. Some are waiting for others to do it, but I don't think it's a question of should we do it. It's a when.
Okay, thank you very much. Not going anywhere just yet. I want to throw it open to the floor now. There's a couple of handheld mics down there. Has anybody got any questions of a panel, the like of which you're not likely to see very often? Service providers, vendors, and an analyst all in one place and not hitting each other. Fantastic. So if anybody would like to ask a question, I've just got two things I want to ask you. Please, for the cameras, will you stand up? And for other reasons, will you please say who you are and where you're from? Thank you. Utter silence.
First person gets a free PIP network for a year.
I thought a Samsung 7?
A Samsung S7.
7. S7. You get a Samsung S7.
Get the fire going.
The fire.
Turn up the heat.
That's right, turn up the heat.
There's a big box on them down there.
There's one over there.
Is there a question? There is.
I have a question. Andrew Coward, I run strategy at Packard. If the panel were magically transported to startup land tonight, what kind of IoT startup would they want to work for and why?
Nice question.
Yeah.
So really quickly, we just ran in the front part of an innovation contest with Verizon. And there were some really interesting byproduct applications that were virtual test points. Because you're in a virtual market, how are you going to do a physical test point? How are you going to do physical analysis? So I think that there's some very practical tools that you don't realize you really need them until you get in an environment where it's very hard to debug and you feel like you're back in the old days before you had inline debugging. For anybody who's an old software developer like myself, you're blind, and so you need that kind of capability. I think that's going to be way more valuable than anyone expects.
And I would say startup, deep machine learning. Like what you just say that, and I'm having ventures follow you and find a way to fund you to see how, because it's key. It's so that, yeah, deep machine learning.
Yeah, I mean, you sure you didn't read my notes? Because it's
I'll give them back to you.
Yeah, right, there you go. Thanks. Okay. It says predictive analytics and automation, right? So that whole machine learning concept is to say, now how do we make it smarter? That we've got some historical data and get to the point of automating and optimizing. It's more than just automating, it's then optimizing it and telling you. Those are, I think, the direction that I would be excited about from a startup.
One more plug for NFV.
Yep.
You know, we have to understand that. Think of a drone collecting environmental data and surveillance data of pick a place. Right. That's a very different IoT application than a smart meter sending a read or a recloser on a power line switching on and off. So with an intelligence, the intelligence of NFV on that IoT backbone, it can make smart decisions like making sure that the resources are available depending on the application and doing cool things like keeping the analytics and the reporting at the edge of the network. So, you know, NFV keeps just popping up on it.
Yeah, I think that all the analytics are still a lot of work to do to analyze the data, maybe to optimize also the collection of data. And deep learning, do we need deep learning depends on the kind of data we collect. But I agree that we need some tools to help enterprise to analyze their data, to visualize them, and so on. And I'm not sure that we are yet there.
So I'll be boring and agree with everybody. And say I believe this too, and so that's what I was highlighting in my talk this morning, that we have the compute locations, we are working on the connectivity, but what makes all this real is really the decision fabric we're building. We are building a decision fabric, and if we do it properly, that's what will add the value.
That partially answered your question, Andrew, I think. It sort of petered out as we got down the other end a bit, but there we are. We've got time for one more. If there's anybody out there who has anything they want to say, now's your chance.
This is Bruce Seeley with Riverbed. It's kind of a follow-on to his question, and more particular to the carriers, and no offense to the analyst here, but another analyst, they're predicting 21 billion IoT devices by 2020, maybe 50. And to the predictive analytics point, how do you as a carrier plan to handle all that data? I mean, that's something that's unimaginable right now. 21 billion new devices out there, right? And it's so that if you can get the predictive point right and pull that down into something manageable, what are your plans for that, or what's your idea from that standpoint?
Here's how I would personally answer the question, and I'll say personally, so when this gets back to HQ, it's not a company statement, but a couple of things. So the Verizon brand in the US, we are a consumer brand, and we have our own big data engine so that we can digest our own data to be able to market better and deliver better insights to our customers. So we've got experience in big data and analytics. Number two, with the recent acquisitions, AOL comes in mind. AOL came in with some interesting data analytic capabilities. Number 3, some of the folks that we actually have a big data and analytics team. Half of them are from NASA. They're in Palo Alto. So there's things that we're building. And last bit, based on how we've been acquiring companies for the past 18 months, I think we're well positioned that if we feel we're missing a piece, namely, machine learning, deep machine learning, any kind of analytics, I think we will go find it in order to deliver the ultimate, IoT experience to that customer. We definitely have the pockets to do it, and we won't stop until we deliver, a happy, good customer experience.
So just one thing that's an interesting example about the value of data, if people go beyond their own, in optimization and service, which tends to be the place where most of the operators have started, is how do I make my services better and predict value and give more services to my customers. But there's an insurance company in the US that allows you to put a sensor on your exhaust to determine how your insurance rate should be set based on how you drive. And it turns out that after you privatize that data, there's resells of different analysis and different spins of that same data that was collected by the insurance company for where should I put a restaurant, where do we need a stoplight, and different companies will actually do different analysis on the same data set and pay for the same data set repeatedly to get the better information. And so it's less about what do we do with all this data and where do we store it and what can we throw away. I think it's really how can we be creative in privatizing it to the point where somebody else can find value in it too.
I think the questions are 2 parts. How we are able to collect data, to analyze them, and so on. So to collect data, analyze them, it's not a big issue for us. We also have some tools. And for example, we sell also the movement of population in France based on cell networks. That's one part. On the second part, how to host the billions of devices. I think by the past we were able to accept the growth of traffic from mobile network or for fixed network. So we were quite agile to do that. We'll need more frequencies to be able to host all these devices, but I think it's a good way with 5G. So I'm quite confident that we will be able to cover all the requirements that will arrive with the various
10
markets.
seconds, I'm counting. 1.
Okay, cool. So, and if I may, back to the how are we preparing the network? So, we are already ahead with a Cat-M1, which is a LTE standard, and we are we have a lot of partners like Sequence, again back at Intel, and the pricing for these modules will be extremely competitive to what we're seeing from LoRa and Sigfox, but the infrastructure is there now. So how are we preparing the network? We've put an IoT core on our LTE architecture to basically give space, because we don't want your mobile phone streaming Snapchat, Facebook, NFL, MLB competing, Pokemon Go, competing with a drone or a smart meter. So we're also doing it from an architecture level specific for IoT.
David, you could have run 400 meters in that 10 seconds, but never mind.
I run fast.
Right, this is the end. Anybody got any last thing to say? Otherwise, we are going to wrap. Okay then, I'd just like to say thank you to our sponsors, Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and to Intel, to everyone on the panel for all the input and hard work. And a lot of stuff went on in the green room around the back before we started doing this. Thanks to everyone who's made such a beautiful venue like this look even greater. And thanks to you, the audience, very much. If you in a moment I'm going to ask you to show your appreciation in the usual way, which isn't throwing bottles, by the way. And then immediately after that, Werner Schaefer down there is going to come up now, Werner, and Werner Schaefer is GM, and I don't know what else you are, Schaefer, Werner, VP and General Manager, that's it, NFV at Hewlett Packard Enterprise.
So we're getting to the fun part. It's been a long day. We started at 7:30 this morning with our roundtables and talked about Mano and all these things. So it was great. Thank you to the panel. Excellent to have you with us. And I want to say just a few words, besides obviously us being a great partnership with Intel. We've started a lot of these things going back to BT. We keep reminiscent about that. Over 5 years now that we're working on NFV together. But what we're here today, the Louwman Museum, is started in the 1930s, actually 1934. It's the world's largest collection of antique cars. There's about 240 in here. And what we've prepared for you now is that you can actually, on the way back, when you grab some food, we got more food stations here around to have time and eat and talk, and we'll actually have tours for you. So on the way back there's some tour guides that will be waiting for you, and they'll take you through the exhibition. I had the chance to do that right before we started here. It's phenomenal. There's some really unique cars here. There's one of the world left to see here, so this is really, really a great place. Use this time, please, to mix and mingle. Did you want to ask me about Swisscom? You wanted to ask me about Swisscom. I have to say that.
You know what? I want to ask you about Swisscom and the Aston Martin.
Oh, there you go. So the Aston Martin is right back there. I make it very easy. Armin Veit from Swisscom is sitting right there. So if you have any questions about it, we'll punt it to him. Great partnership. We just did an interview with TelecomTV yesterday. You will hear more about that. So typical case of don't believe everything that's in the papers. I think that's for our election too, right?
Yeah.
Let's not go there.
Don't even read the papers with the election.
That's right. So have fun, enjoy, mix and mingle. This is what this is all about. Exchange your thoughts, what you're doing, how you're doing it, and what better way to do it than looking at some really fantastic cars there. So thank you again. Thanks to the panel. Yes. Appreciate it. David, Ray, Eric, and Prodip, and obviously Martyn as well. Thank you so much. Lynn, appreciate it. Thanks.